If you've ever been told you're too sensitive or you struggle with anxiety in ways that seem overwhelming compared to others, this episode's for you. Being yelled at, criticized, or experiencing abuse is painful for anyone. But for a highly sensitive person who feels everything more deeply, it can create a profound, lasting wound that gets drilled into our system. Many HSPs struggle with anxiety and can't pinpoint a single event as the root cause, but often their trauma could be a lifetime of overstimulation. The anxiety and the sensitivity go so closely together that they get coupled with each other, and we tend to tar them with the same brush. It's not that the sensitivity has to be healed, it just has to be understood. Now, there are gifts to high sensitivity. One of the biggest strengths of HSPs is their Welcome back to another episode of the Anxiety RX podcast. And today we're diving into the world of highly sensitive people, what that means, how it links to chronic anxiety, and how early experiences can shape the trajectory of a highly sensitive person's life. To help us understand, we'll be using the groundbreaking work of Dr. Elaine Aron, who pioneered research into high sensitivity. She developed the DOES framework, DOES, which outlines the key characteristics of highly sensitive people, HSPs. Depth of processing, overstimulation, emotional reactivity and empathy, and sensing subtleties. As a physician, I've never seen chronic anxiety exist without sensitivity. I've often said that being a sensitive person makes you more susceptible to chronic anxiety. And when I discovered Dr. Aron's work, I knew I had to dive deeper into this connection. So if you've ever been told you're too sensitive, or you struggle with anxiety in ways that seem overwhelming compared to others, this episode's for you. So what is a highly sensitive person? Highly sensitive people, HSPs, make up about 15 to 20% of the population, equally distributed in men and women. It's important to note that it's not a disorder, but rather an innate trait found again in men and women equally. The same as, say, being left or right-handed. That trait is just present in the population. High sensitivity affects how a person processes information, responds to stimuli, and experiences emotions. And Dr. Aron's research has identified a set of core characteristics that define high sensitivity, known again as the DOES framework. So D is for depth of processing. At the foundation of high sensitivity is the tendency to process information very deeply. HSPs think through things carefully, connect details to past experiences, and often have strong intuition. The depth of processing allows for insightful decision-making, but can also lead to overthinking and analysis and paralysis. And as worriers, we all know what that means. Studies show that HSPs engage more parts of the brain responsible for deeper information processing: amygdala, hippocampus, insula. And this can make them highly intuitive and thoughtful, but also more prone to rumination, worry, and overthinking. The O is for overstimulation because HSPs notice so much. They can become overwhelmed more easily because they notice so much all the time. Loud environments, bright lights, crowded spaces, or even long social interactions can feel exhausting. What might be a minor annoyance for someone else can be completely draining for an HSP. Research shows that highly sensitive individuals perform well on perceptual tasks, but also experience more stress afterward. This heightened response can contribute to chronic stress, anxiety, and a need to withdraw to recover. And the E is for emotional reactivity and empathy. HSPs feel things deeply, whether positive or negative. They react more strongly to emotionally charged situations, which can make them incredibly compassionate and understanding, but also more susceptible to stress and emotional exhaustion and anxiety and depression. Studies reveal that HSPs show greater brain activation in areas linked to emotion and empathy. This means that they may experience deep joy and connection, but also greater distress when exposed to negativity or conflict. In other words, they feel the highs more and they feel the lows more. Then we go to S for sensing the subtleties. HSPs pick up on the details that others miss. Tone of voice, microexpressions, small changes in the environment. While this can be a strength, it can also overwhelm them very easily. And it prevents them from reading situations well because they're so inundated with all this sensitivity and stimulation. So when you're overstimulated, your alarm kicks up and you're more likely to have an anxiety response to that alarm. So let's break down how each aspect of the DOES acronym can contribute to chronic anxiety. The first one is D for depth of processing. Being yelled at, criticized, or experiencing abuse is painful for anyone. But for a highly sensitive person who feels everything more deeply, it can create a profound, lasting wound that I call alarm that gets drilled into our system. Deep processing means that these experiences get embedded in our nervous system, leading to chronic anxiety. This is the alarm. This is the basis of alarm. Highly sensitive people really create alarm in their system so much easier than the normal population. Many HSPs struggle with anxiety and can't pinpoint a single event as the root cause. Others can, but often their trauma could be a lifetime of overstimulation, never really feeling safe because the world felt too loud, too chaotic, too unpredictable, too much. And they were never recognized and acknowledged that they were highly sensitive. Or they were ridiculed for it. You're too sensitive. Again, highly sensitive children are often and sometimes inadvertently shamed for being too sensitive. Over time, they learn to suppress their emotions and mistrust themselves, mistrust their own reactions, and become overly accommodating to others. Highly sensitive people can really become people pleasers. It's really just a quick flip of the switch. And it can lead to a deep fear of rejection and maladaptive behaviors like addiction or, again, people pleasing. The S is for sensing subtleties. Emotional exhaustion is really the effect of many HSPs growing up feeling responsible for their parents' emotions. When you're responsible for someone else, it's exhausting. And they have to adapt themselves to keep the peace. And this was their only sense of safety. This often leads to chronic emotional exhaustion because you're not only reading yourself, but you're reading everyone else. And it can often lead to anxiety, depression, and a lot of times leads to chronic pain. Now, there are gifts to high sensitivity, and we've talked a lot about the challenges of being highly sensitive. But equally important is to recognize that high sensitivity is a gift, although many people didn't agree with me. HSPs are naturally intuitive, deeply empathic, and incredibly creative. One of the biggest strengths of HSPs is their right brain dominance, the part of the brain responsible for creativity, intuition, and deep emotional understanding. This means that highly sensitive people often excel in artistic expression and in problem solving and in seeing connections that others might miss. I think a lot of comedians are highly sensitive people that notice all these small things that other people don't. And when you point that out as a comedian to people, they laugh because they recognize it's there. It's just they never saw it. So creativity isn't just a talent. It's a tool for healing. When we engage in creative activities like writing, painting, music, or even movement practices like dance or yoga or Tai Chi, we regulate the nervous system and shift us out of this anxiety or alarm that keeps us in this frozen state. When we move out of freeze. And when we create, we activate the parasympathetic nervous system, which counters stress and promotes a sense of calm and play. When we play, HSPs really feel the joy of playing as well. We tend to process emotions deeply, and creative expression provides a powerful outlet for that. So whether it's journaling to release overwhelming thoughts, playing music to process emotions, or painting to externalize an inner experience, creativity allows the HSPs to transform their sensitivity into something really meaningful for them. Highly sensitive people are often guided a lot by their right hemisphere, the more artistic, less linear aspect of our brains. And the power of this right brain activation can really help in anxiety recovery. And most anxiety therapy relies on cognitive approaches, logic, analysis, left brain problem solving, but healing anxiety really requires a balance between the two, creating a balance in your system, a safety in your system. So right brain activities like storytelling, visualization, and artistic expression help us reconnect to a sense of flow and safety. They allow us to express emotions in a way that words alone often can't. For highly sensitive people, embracing their creativity isn't just about making art. It's about reclaiming their natural way of processing the world. When we begin to honor this part of ourselves and not judge ourselves for being overly sensitive, we find not only healing, but also joy, purpose, and a sense of deep connection in life. I see a lot of highly sensitive people these days really shutting down because there is so much negative influence in the world. They're so sensitive that they can't take it. And they tell me in droves that they don't feel much anxiety, but they don't feel much of anything. They feel really blah. They feel really disconnected because they have shut off the world. It's just become too much for them. So being a highly sensitive person is good on some ways if you can handle it the right way, but it can often be a curse, especially in the days that we live in today. So here are some key tips if you're the parent of a highly sensitive person. You may be a highly sensitive person with a highly sensitive person as a child. So it's really important to acknowledge and validate their sensitivity. And in a way, you're acknowledging and validating yourself. Let them know that their emotions are valid and let yourself know that your emotions are valid. They're not too much. Provide space for downtime, both for the child and yourself. Highly sensitive people need quiet, safe spaces to recharge, and they need them more than normal people. Teach emotional regulation to them. Help them develop coping strategies so they can manage their deep feelings in healthy ways. Teach them how to do the physiological sigh, how to put their hand on their chest, how to connect with themselves at a very early age, and repair ruptures as they occur. Sometimes when you dismiss a child's sensitivity, there's a lot of rupture that goes along with it and very little repair. So it's important to create that repair, especially in a highly sensitive child, because if we don't create that repair in a sensitive child, that sensitivity turns into alarm, which eventually turns into anxiety. And perhaps you know that firsthand. But before we can be the parents, grandparents, or caregivers to the highly sensitive child, we want to be first the parent to the highly sensitive child that's within us, healing our own emotional wounds. So if you're an adult, highly sensitive person struggling with anxiety, you might feel like you're one of the ones that got misunderstood and felt inadequate or felt like they were too much. But healing is possible. That sensitivity that you have, you can turn on yourself. And part of that healing comes from understanding what you needed back then and give it to yourself now. Reparenting is a crucial part of healing from anxiety, and that heavily involves giving yourself now what you should have received back then. My acronym SHOULD, which you probably heard on this podcast a number of times, see, hear, open to, understand, love, and defend, represents the key things that every child needs, and especially if you're a highly sensitive child. So the first is being seen. Your emotions are acknowledged and understood, and we see you. We see the emotions. We see that you're sensitive. And perhaps when you were sad, someone noticed and comforted you rather than dismissing you as being too sensitive. It's important to understand that being sensitive is a gift, but when you're a child, it doesn't feel that way. The second is being heard. Your voice mattered. An example, your opinions were valued, not brushed aside as being too much or too crazy. So how can you do that now? This works even with yourself. Hear yourself. Hear, if you're sensitive, that your worries and fears are valid. O is for open to. You were accepted as you were without judgment. If you needed more quiet time, if your parents made space for that, how can you do that now for both yourself and your child? U is for understood. Did you feel like your caregivers understood you? Instead of being told you were too sensitive, did they help you navigate your emotions? Did they say, this is okay. The way you're feeling is okay. We love you regardless. It doesn't matter how you express the emotion. We will help you with that. And L, did you feel loved? Did you feel cherished for who you were? Or did you feel like an outsider in your own house? If you felt like you never had the ability to be yourself, to be someone who just felt things deeply and didn't have to look after other people all the time, like I did when I was younger, how do you do that now? How do you give yourself love and connection now? And the D in the acronym is defended. Did someone stand up for you when you were needed? If you were being bullied, did someone come along and help you? Or were you just left in your pain? And then, if a parent advocated for you in situations where you felt overwhelmed and created some repair, that would have made all the difference. So how do you do that now for the child and for yourself? Now, in closing, I want to reiterate something important. It's never too late to heal. Many of us feel like we're among those who stood to lose so much because our sensitivity wasn't honored in childhood. And we ended up paying the price because truth is, we have the power to rewrite our own narratives. We have the power to understand that we are sensitive, and that's a good thing. It's not something we need to berate ourselves for. We can learn to honor our sensitivity and create safety for ourselves despite that sensitivity, and teach the next generation that sensitivity is a gift. It's not a weakness. And it gives them a chance to be among the ones that have so much to gain from this incredible trait. So if you're a highly sensitive person, you're not broken, you're not weird, you're not and have never been too much. You're exactly as you were meant to be. And the more you embrace that, the more you feel that, the more you express to be seen, heard, open to, understood, loved, and defended, the more you see that child in you as highly sensitive and see them, hear them, open to them, understand them, love them, and defend them. It's not that the sensitivity has to be healed. It just has to be understood. And knowing that you're sensitive is difficult because we have a tendency to blame our anxiety on our sensitivity. And I think there's some truth in that because the anxiety and the sensitivity go so closely together, they get coupled with each other, and we tend to tar them with the same brush. But it's also our sensitivity that drives us to be unique, to be artistic, to present things to the world, to give back to others, and not in a codependent way, to give back to others. This is what I've done with my sensitivity. I've written a book. I've created a program. I create meditations. I really don't want you to have to suffer with anxiety the way that I did. And I think my sensitivity allows me to see how much it hurts me, and I can extrapolate into other people how much it must hurt them. So I relate the healing that I've gone through to other people through my programs, through my book. And I really want you just to be able to embrace yourself, especially if you're a highly sensitive person, and stop taking jabs at yourself. That's from a previous podcast. Jabs are judgment, abandonment, blame, and shame. And we do that to ourselves all the time. And people who are highly sensitive tend to do that to themselves way more than quote unquote normal people. So when we recognize that the sensitivity is a gift, we no longer need to judge ourselves for it. We no longer need to separate from ourselves. We don't longer need to blame ourselves for our sensitivity, or worse, shame ourselves for our sensitivity. Our sensitivity is a gift, but it's also a gift that points you back to yourself. It points you back to the child in you. And that sensitivity in you is also in your child. So it makes that child in you open to receiving love from you. There may be blocks there because of that sensitivity, but we have to really be focused and connected to that younger version of us, to the alarmed younger child in us, as sensitive as they were. And we need to use that sensitivity that's in us and in them, in our adult self, in our child self. And we can use that sensitivity to connect between each other, between the adult and the child. And when we connect between the adult and the child, and we see the child, and we show the child that they're okay with us, we love them unconditionally, we have to stop blocking love for ourselves, because that's what keeps anxiety and alarm going. And that sensitivity we can use to get in touch with love and joy and the best parts of life, rather than being a burden to us. So if you're a highly sensitive person like me, like most people listening to this because they have anxiety, it's probably because you went through a time in your childhood that was traumatic. And because of your sensitivity, it affected you much more than it would affect other people. And that's nothing to be ashamed of, but it does house the skeleton of your gifts that you can give back both to yourself and to the world. And I'll see you next time.